The title down. The title is Going Out. Last week, coming in, going out. Luke 14, verse 15. Now, when one of those who sat at the table with him heard these things, he said to him, Blessed is he who shall eat bread in the kingdom of God. Then he said to him, a certain man. Now, notice, then he, Jesus, said to him, this is the man that said, Blessed is he who shall eat bread in the kingdom of God. Then Jesus said, a certain man gave a great supper and invited many, and sent his servant at supper time to say to those who were invited, Come, or we could say, come in. Come in, for all things are now ready. But they all with one accord began to make excuses. The first said to him, I bought a piece of ground. I must go and see it. I ask you to have me excused. And another said, I bought 5 yoke of oxen, and I'm going to test them. I ask you to have me excused. Still another said, I have married a wife, and therefore I cannot come. So that servant came and reported these things to his master. Then the master of the house, being angry, said to his servant, would you say these words, all the campuses out loud? Go out quickly into the streets and lanes of the city and bring in, sounds a lot like come in, bring in here the poor, the maimed, the lame, and the blind. And by the way, I just want to remind you, that's us. That's us. We're the ones that got invited to this supper that were not first invited. The poor, the maimed, the lame, and the blind. And the servant said, Master, it is done as you commanded, and still there is room. Then the master said to that servant, would you say these words out loud? Go out into the highways and hedges, watch, and compel them to come in, that my house may be filled. For I say to you that none of those men who were invited shall taste my supper. Now, this is an amazing story. They're sitting around there having dinner with Jesus. One says, boy, it's going to be great to eat in heaven. And Jesus says, let me tell you about that supper. Remember, Revelation tells us about the marriage supper of the Lamb. He says, let me tell you something about that. And he goes into this story, and it's a parable. I've given it my own name, though, okay? So it's kind of a humorous thing, I think, when you read this thing. I call it the parable of the great excuses. And I gave each excuse a name, all right? And those are the 3 points. So if you want to write these down, here's number 1. Number 1 is the case of the missing ground. The case of the missing ground. Here's the reason I say this. This guy said, I bought some ground, and I need to go look at it. Why? It's not going anywhere. Ground has never gotten up and left. No one steals ground. Maybe you steal the deed to the ground, but you can't steal the ground. Never have you gone out to look at your ground and say, where's my ground? Someone took my ground. My ground was right here. I bought a piece of ground, and I need to go look at it. Well, it almost sounds like he bought it without looking at it, doesn't it? I bought some ground, and I need to go look at it. Well, why would you buy some ground without looking at it? I mean, that's the way swampland is sold. I.e. the Louisiana Purchase. No, I'm just joking if you're from Louisiana. I'm just wondering when they got down to Southern, oh, man, how much did we pay for? Okay, so anyway. And then the other thing is these banquets were held at night. Correct me if I'm wrong, but had flashlights been invented yet? Car headlights? How are you going to look at it? I bought a piece of ground. I need to go look at it. It's crazy. The case of the missing ground. Here's the second one. The case of the radioactive oxen. Now, here's the reason I say that. I bought some oxen. I need to go test them. It's at night. How are you going to plow at night? So I said the radioactive, apparently these oxen glowed in the dark. Or one of them had a very shiny nose, and if you ever saw it, you would even say it glows. It's just crazy. And maybe he's going to plow the field of the other guy that is going out at night too, you know. Apparently these two guys are best friends because they buy things without looking at them. I bought some ground, and now I need to go look at it. I bought some oxen, and now I need to go test them. That's like saying I bought a car, and I need to test drive it. You do the test drive before you buy it, right? So these excuses make no sense at all. Here's the third one. I call it the case of the killer bride. And here's why. I want you to think about this. These banquets were incredible. These banquets were over the top. We don't get as excited about a banquet as these people did because we can have just about any kind of food we want, except when you're on a fast. But we can have just about any type of food that we want at any time, but they couldn't. Their diet consisted of a very bland diet, basically the same thing, and sometimes you had barely enough to feed the family. So when someone was throwing a banquet, it was all sorts of food, and it was very generous, and you could just go and just gorge. You could just feast, you know. No one turned down banquets. That's why Jesus is using this, because it was so foolish to hear these things, to hear these, I'm wondering if they were just laughing while he was telling this. See, think about this. This guy just got married, okay? Now, I'm not trying to be insensitive here. I'm really not. But what guy in his right mind who just got married would turn down a banquet and take his chances on what a new bride is going to make? I'm not trying to be insensitive, but I'm simply trying to be honest here. Not all ladies come into the marriage knowing how to cook. Is that right? I mean, some guys, okay, all right, thank you. One guy, brave enough and foolish enough to say amen. Okay. I remember a friend of mine got married. We went over to his apartment. You know, everyone lived in apartments. You know, you went over to his apartment, and he'd been married 1 week, and opened the door, and smoke just billowed out of the apartment. And we went in, and they were eating burned baked potatoes. Well, that's bad. And in a moment, she got up and left the room, and I said to him, "Why are you eating this?" He said, "Shh, don't you say a word." He said, "I said something 3 days ago, and you see that couch? That's where I've been sleeping." He said, "I'm eating this baked potato." I said, "Why is it the smoke alarm going off?" He said, "I unplugged it." Now, the other thing I think is funny, look back just for a moment. Look at verse 8.